All right, this weekend we've got ourselves an exciting fight night once again, but this time taking place at UFC Paris and not stuck once again in the Apex Center in Las Vegas in a warehouse that once in a while will have a few celebrities and known people come through, but realistically, a high school gym can pack more people with exciting games than the Apex can. And at one point, they used it as the headquarters during the pandemics to hold some of the biggest fights that we've already had. Like, for example, Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic. And then you had Francis Ngannou against Stipe Miocic again. Among many other fights, obviously, Izzy's fights, many of them have also been in the pandemic stages. But nonetheless, we're back on the road. They are going to fight in Paris, which, again, is a city known for the Olympics not too long ago. Uh, this September 28th, it's going to be the home of the UFC. And we've got an exciting lineup to talk about. Moicano versus Saint Denis as the headliner, the co-main event, Imavov taking on Allen. And of course, I am going to focus on the main event of this particular fight and the kicks and punches and the technical aspects of that, as opposed to, let's say, going over the entire card. Now, do I know some of the people that are in this particular card? Yes, but there's a lot that I don't. And for me to sit here, like the other channels such as MMA Guru, to go over the entire card would be a disservice to all of you because, in realistic terms, he can't really grasp and understand the full capacity of these fighters to give an accurate prediction other than what he can read off of a paper due to their record. So such and such is going to do this because he did this in his fight, and because this happened, this is going to happen, and it says so on paper. It doesn't work like that. But nonetheless, they still serve that positive service to the world of MMA content creation. And this is what I'm going to present to you is the best possible breakdown of the main event, while also giving the respect to the people in the undercard, because after all, this entire card has 14 fights, once again, taking place in Paris, France, a place that was the Olympic host this summer. And here it is right here, me, 16 years old at Paris 2001 in this picture right here. We're going to go over all of that, and we're going to go over the entire card. But first, let's go right up the top, okay? So obviously, it is Benoit Saint Denis taking on Moicano. We're going to go into that, but first, we're going to go through the entire card. But first, let me explain to you guys why I think this is the perfect 50-50 matchup. Obviously, the ranking shows it. Number 10 guy, number 13 guy. Both of these guys were pushed way too soon in terms of Benoit Saint Denis sort of fighting Dustin Poirier too early in his career. But they thought that he can wash him as this new lightweight that was going to sweep the old guys that were sort of holding the divisions hostage, such as Gaethje, uh, maybe even Michael Chandler is part of that list. All these guys that are ranked squatters, okay? But by the end of it all, Dustin Poirier showed that he was still the top dog, and Benoit Saint Denis is still part of the top 15 as well as he should. And here he is with Renato Moicano, same thing. Fought Dos Anjos a little bit too early. But here we are. These two guys are exactly where they need to be. And I'm going to break down later on, after I go over this entire card, why these two are a 50-50 matchup. So Nasruddin Imavov taking on Brendan Allen. That's going to be a great middleweight matchup. We've seen that recent street fight video of Brendan Allen. I believe it was against Chris Curtis. Who was it that he street fought against? Let's see if we can pull that up. Brendan Allen Street fight. It was Marvin Vittori that he got into a street fight with. So was it okay, it was at a PFL event? Was it? Okay. It was at a PFL event from what I understand here. So let's pull this one up. So what it seems to be here is Marvin Vittori sort of looking for Brendan Allen. There's a crowd around them. It seems to be Michael Johnson is also part of this crowd in this melee. All right. I tell you what. All right. Sorry, had a bit of some technical issues there. Here we go. Okay, so I think we get the picture, right? Obviously, this was just Brendan Ellen hooking off on Marvin Vittori, but nonetheless, sort of irrelevant tonight, but just thought it was entertaining to share Brendan Ellen getting into a bit of a crash out session over there. But nonetheless, exciting fight. Great trip for him to be out in Paris, taking on the hometown hero, sort of say, of Nasruddin Imavov. Underneath that card, it's going to be William Gomez taking on Joe Henderson Brito. So Brazilian versus the Frenchman, both great records, by the way, at the featherweight division, 13-2 versus 17-3 and one draw. And obviously Brian Battle, which, by the way, is a Dana White Contender Series fighter, taking on Kevin Jouzet, the local Frenchman, 10-2. It's going to be an interesting matchup. Interesting ranking here. 32 is in the world of Brian Battle, whereas Kevin Jouzet is number 58 in the world. So quite a big jump of competition for him right there. Now, how about this? Former Cage Warriors 145 champion, and it's taken him a while to get into the UFC. Now he's in here. Obviously, the 19-10 record is indicative of why he had some sort of challenges to come into the UFC while he was champion at Cage Warriors. But nonetheless, here he is taking on Gabriel Miranda and Faraz Zaham taking on Matt Pravola, and then Ion Kotalaba, the fan favorite and what have you, taking on the newcomer of Ivan Arslan, the Croatian light heavyweight fighter, now fighting in the UFC. So what else do we have here? We have Omar Sy, 10-0, light heavyweight, taking on the Korean light heavyweight Da Un Jung, 15-2, one draw, taking on the undefeated Umar Sy. So a lot of pressure on his part, right? Considering that he's a hometown guy and he's undefeated. How about Klein taking on Roosevelt Roberts in the lightweight division? Taylor Lopoulos, former UFC veteran, now back in the UFC, taking on the American Vince Morales. And then you have Aileen Perez taking on Daria Zelenskayokova. Daniel Perez taking on Victor Alamiranto. Nora Cornoli taking on Jacqueline Cavalcanti. Chris Duncan, how about this, taking on Bolajai Oki in the lightweight division. And that opens up the fight right there. So I believe yeah, these were the fights that were supposed to be canceled. Okay, so Jermaine Durandamy was supposed to be in this card. So I guess yeah, the replacement is going to be Jacqueline Cavalante. Okay. So interesting enough. All right. So let's break down Moicano and Benoit Saint Denis here. I mentioned earlier, obviously, Benoit Saint Denis, a top lightweight, and Renato Moicano, been a longtime veteran of the UFC, not necessarily in the top level, right? But I guess was pushed a little too far. All right, sorry about that. Had to adjust some little technical difficulties there, but nonetheless, so we're gonna go over the career of Moicano and the career of Benoit Saint Denis to sort of get an over understanding of their careers and how this fight is going to go as a result of that. So, how Moicano got into the UFC, it was undefeated, right? He was undefeated when he first had came in, and as a result, his first fight in the UFC, he got a rear naked choke against Tom Nimakami, I believe it was his name. Let me make sure that's correct. Okay, Tom Nimakami. So, December 20th, 2024. Oh, yeah, it's about 10 years ago. So it's going to be his 10th year anniversary as a UFC fighter. Before that, he was 8-0 with one draw coming into the UFC. And after that, he had two split decisions with two tough fights, right? Which really shows you the grit of Moicano, but also the rounds that he had accumulated when he came into the UFC or after he had came into the UFC. So there was Jeremy Stevens right afterwards, where he got a split decision win over him. And just right before that, Zubaira, who, by the way, is the infamous uh, training partner of Khabib, the guy that got into that punch out with McGregor after the Khabib fight in the cage. But yeah, his first loss in the UFC was against Brian Ortega. Obviously, not a bad loss to have, considering that Brian Ortega went on to become a title challenger twice. Calvin Kattar, he got a unanimous decision over him. So now he's just accumulating rounds. And then he submits Cub Swanson. Okay, that's a very big win for Moicano. He gets in there with Jose Aldo, gets pushed too soon. Obviously, gets knocked out. Second round TKO by Jose Aldo. Jung San, obviously, zombie, Korean zombie. He gets a knockout from him in the first round, literally in the first minute. Then gets in there with Damir Hadjokovic, gets a rear naked choke, then loses to Rafael Fiziev, which, by the way, is a top staple in the 155 division right now. Gets a rear naked choke against Jai Herbert, rear naked choke against Alexander Hernandez, and then obviously gets a 5-round decision against Rafael Dos Anjos, which, by the way, Rafael Dos Anjos sort of gave him a bit of a mercy beating there, right? But then he comes back and submits Brad Riddell, gets a unanimous decision over Drew Dober, and then now his recent win against Jalen Turner, which is not a very easy fight, but he was able to do that. He was able to get a TKO and a finish over Jalen Turner. So that's what we have with Moicano, right? So what do we know about Moicano's personal life? Obviously, he has a wife and a kid, so you would imagine that's a big motivation for him. He's got a pretty interesting grappling career. Obviously, he's been in the UFC's Fight Pass Invitational. His background, he comes off from a very well-off family. Okay, started training judo at 8, which, by the way, judo is a sport for many of these guys that are a little well off, right? Doctors, lawyers. Obviously, look at Ronda Rousey's mom and how she came up in judo. So he attended a university in order to become a lawyer, but dropped out 2 years later to pursue MMA. Because why? He had the background in martial arts, and not only that, he also was literally made to fight, and here he is. So now let's take a look at Benoit Saint Denis. Okay, let's take a look at Benoit Saint Denis and what he has to offer to this table. Benoit Saint Denis. So Dustin Poirier is one of the most recent, or well, not recent, not just the recent, but really the most well-known fight that he's known for, right? Back in UFC 299, gets a knockout loss against him. The only loss he's had prior to that was against Elezu Zaleski dos Santos, which was back in UFC 267. His debut, I believe, was that was his first loss, was his UFC debut. Prior to that, like Moicano, he came in the UFC 8-0, undefeated, with one draw or one no contest. And I believe the no contest was due to an accidental clash of heads. Okay, so when he came into the UFC, he had that loss against Dos Santos, gets a rear naked win over Stoltz. Gabriel Miranda, who, by the way, is in this card, he gets a TKO finish against him. Ismael Bonin gets a rear face crank. Tiago Moises, he gets a finish. Matt Pravola gets a head kick. And then he fights Dustin Poirier. So that's all that we really know about Benoit Saint Denis. Now, personal life that we know about him, he's a French Special Forces soldier. So obviously, what does that really mean in the world of MMA other than the fact that it's great accolades for you? Well, what it just really means is that you have great stamina. That is one thing that you can always count on Benoit Saint Denis, and not only great stamina, due to the fact that that is what you need in the high demands of a military life, but uh, you can also grind and work harder than the next guy when the going gets the tough. Okay, not only that, he's had an early kickboxing and BJJ career, so he's been training while he was in the military and even beforehand. So he's a lifelong martial artist, just like Moicano. So all of that being said, this is literally the reason why I say that this is a 50-50 fight to the fullest order. But who's going to win it? I'm about to tell you who's going to win it. I'm going to go with Moicano. You want to know why I'm going with Moicano? Because I just believe that he has the higher experience, 10 years in the UFC. I think it's going to be very difficult to knock him out. I think that he's going to come into this fight very experienced, very well rounded, but also coming off of a great win over Jalen Turner. That momentum is going to lend him some positivities in comparison to Benoit Saint Denis, who's coming off of a knockout loss from Dustin Poirier, which I believe can really affect him going into this fight. But he's tough, so I don't really anticipate him getting knocked out. What I do anticipate is both of them fighting a very methodical fight, but Moicano coming out in the end with a 5-round decision win, because guess what? That mercy beating that Dos Anjos gave him really did him some positivities going into this fight, because he now knows what it feels like to go 5 rounds. Does Benoit Saint Denis know what it's like to go 5 rounds? Well, I don't think so. None of his fights in the regional scene have really went to a decision. So therefore, even if he fought any championship fights in these smaller organizations, it never went to a decision. So he just doesn't know what that feels like. Now, obviously, being a French special forces soldier, you have that background of really carrying your stamina through. But many people say that about all these military guys. The thing is, you got to understand there is stamina for fighting and there is stamina for military life. And they are two different things. But his stamina, I'm talking about Benoit Saint Denis, is predicated on his experience as a fighter. As you've seen, he's had a background in grappling, in kickboxing prior to coming into the military and while he was in the military. So everything that he has accumulated in terms of being able to withstand a certain stamina or pace in a fight is going to be from combat sports and not necessarily the world of the military. But with that said, he's still tough. He can still grind, and that background still does help that, but not to a seasoned fighter against Moicano. And that is the reason why I have Moicano winning this fight by unanimous decision. So don't forget to like and subscribe, because I'm going to end this video with giving you a couple more tips and a couple more things to look out for in this fight, because it's going to be 25 minutes, just like the entire 25 minutes that you're going to see out of this fight. This has been a 25-minute championship round content. And also look out for Moicano to surprisingly really get in close range and dominate in that department. Now, is there a world where Benoit Saint Denis can take him down and outpoint him? Yes. But if he doesn't, and he doesn't continuously do that, Moicano's going to have the better stand up. He's going to have the better boxing, and he's going to have the better range, and he's going to pick him apart. And that is the reason why I see a 5-round decision for Moicano. So with that said, that is my 25 minutes championship round prediction for Moicano. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next content, inshallah.